The Year to There podcast, it's time to start the show. Be sure to hold on tight, here we go. Exploring all the different Disney destinations. Year to There, it's time to start the fun.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Year to There podcast, Walt Disney World Word of the Week. I am your host Phil Gramlich, and each week I will bring you a new Walt Disney World word and then give you tips, history, ideas, facts, sometimes fiction, all kinds of stuff about that Walt Disney World word. So as always, without further fanfare, let's get right into it. This week's Walt Disney World word of the week is brought to you by the letter O. O for Orlando. You thought I was going to say O-Town, didn't you? Remember that boy band from the early 2000s, O-Town? Nah, it's Orlando. Yep, that's right. This week I want to talk all about the little town in Central Florida that became a big city thanks hugely in part to Walt Disney's decision to build his second big-time Disney theme park near the then very small city of Orlando.
Here in Florida, we have something special we never enjoyed at Disneyland, the blessing of science. There's enough land here to hold all the ideas and plans we could possibly imagine.
So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the history and what led Walt Disney to the Orlando area. After Disneyland was completed, well, not really completed, right? Because Walt Disney did say Disneyland will never be completed. But after construction was finished and the park had been running for a while, Walt publicly stated that he would never open another Disneyland and he wouldn't be in the business of running theme parks. That kind of goes back to his philosophy of not repeating his own successes, right? As he said after the first Three Little Pigs film that he released, you can't top pigs with pigs. But by the late 1950s, 1959 about, Walt Disney Productions and Walt Disney himself started looking at different areas, different places to build the next great Disney theme park. One of the places Disney actually thought about putting his next theme park was New Orleans. As a matter of fact, the Disney company had several stretches of land picked out that they were about to purchase before eventually settling on not building the park there, but instead building it outside Orlando. Disney also briefly considered during a trip to Niagara Falls building the next big theme park right outside Niagara Falls. Of course, that fell through as well. And probably most famous of these different locations that they considered was St. Louis, Missouri. Disney actually was in negotiations with the Bush family to open an indoor theme park right by where the new Bush Stadium was being built in the 60s. So Walt met with the mayor of St. Louis. They talked all about it. They actually started to put the plans in place. As I said, it was going to be an indoor theme park with a couple of floors, and it was going to house very famous Disney attractions like Pirates of the Caribbean, the Haunted Mansion, a Western riverboat ride that kind of was later designed as Big Thunder Mountain in Disneyland and Walt Disney World, an opera house, a Main Street USA, and more. Now, for several reasons, this park was never built and was never even started. It's been rumored that it was because Walt decided he didn't want to sell beer in his theme park, and the Bush family, particularly Augustus Bush, was not having any part of that. But again, that's just a rumor. But all we know is ultimately the new Disney park was not built in St. Louis. Then in 1965, Walt Disney and the Disney Company decided they were going to build a ski resort at Mineral King in the Sequoia National Forest in California. Now, the Mineral King ski resort was also going to hold a Country Bear Jamboree style attraction. For several reasons, this one was also not built. And one of the reasons may have been that Walt and the Disney Company were already designing and had already purchased land in the Central Florida area for their quote-unquote Disneyland East project. What almost no one knew was that in 1963, Walt Disney had flown over the swampland in Central Florida and had already decided that that is where he wanted to build his new theme park. He and the company took into account the construction of I-4 or Interstate 4. Sorry, it's old habits are hard to break. It's not Interstate 4 if you live in Florida, it's I-4. And the Florida Turnpike. And then he also noticed that to the east of where he wanted to build the park was McCoy Air Force Base, which was later renamed Orlando International Airport, but it still keeps the McCoy Air Force Base 3-letter code as MCO. So Walt Disney decided that his site for the next theme park would be a centrally located site near Bay Lake. And in order to avoid speculation that it was the Disney company that was buying up all this land in the area, they developed several dummy corporations to buy this land. Of course, what would have happened if they found out it was Disney buying up all this land? The price would have gone up and Disney would never have been able to afford as much land as they ended up getting. So some of these dummy corporations that they used were the I-4 Corporation, the Latin American Development and Management Corporation, and the Reedy Creek Ranch Corporation. So these days, a lot of those fictional companies that were used to buy up the land are memorialized on the windows of the Magic Kingdom's Main Street USA. So Walt Disney and the Disney Company thought they were doing a really good job of keeping all of this under wraps. But even in 1965, the story had a way of getting out. So during Disneyland's 10th centennial, that's their 10th anniversary, reporters from all across the country were invited out to Anaheim to be entertained by the Disney Company. One reporter, Emily Bavar from the Sentinel-Star in Orlando, which would eventually become the Orlando Sentinel, caught up with Disney's publicist Charlie Ridgway and asked him if the mystery buyer of all of the land in Central Florida in the Orlando area was Walt Disney. And Ridgway really didn't have any idea. He honestly didn't know that they were purchasing the land. So he said to Emily, "Beats me, you'll have to ask Walt tomorrow at lunch." So when she had a chance to ask Walt Disney that question the next day, she said, quote, "He looked like I had thrown a bucket of water in his face." So she took that as, yes, he is behind all the land purchases, and Disney is coming to Central Florida. By October 24th, 1965, the Sentinel-Star ran a big-time headline that said, "We say mystery industry is Disney." And by November 15th, 1965, at 2:00 p.m., Walt, along with Roy Disney, held a press conference that announced that the Florida project was coming to the Orlando area. Of course, Walt Disney passed away from lung cancer in 1966, and sadly, he never got to see Walt Disney World, or actually, as it was called then, Disney World, built. It was actually his brother, Roy O. Disney, who, after Walt's death, decided that Disney World would be renamed Walt Disney World to honor his brother's legacy. The construction of Walt Disney World began in 1967. By 1971, the Walt Disney World Resort had opened, including the Magic Kingdom, the Palm and Magnolia golf courses, Disney's Contemporary Resort, the Polynesian Resort, and Disney's Fort Wilderness Resort and Campground. But just imagine if Walt had been a beer drinker, or if New Orleans politicians hadn't given him all that trouble in building his new park in New Orleans, we may have a very different Orlando and Central Florida these days. And that will do it for this week's Walt Disney World Word of the Week. As always, thank you so much for listening. It is greatly, greatly appreciated. I really sincerely hope you enjoyed this week's episode. I always like looking back at the history of Walt Disney World. It's a lot of fun for me, and I hope it was for you too. And if you did enjoy this week's episode, all I ask is that you tell someone about it. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your neighbor, tell your doctor, tell your dentist. I'm sure your dentist would enjoy it. Listen, it can't be that much fun working on other people's teeth all day. Maybe I'm just saying that because I don't like the dentist and it terrifies me. But I'm just saying, I think your dentist would really enjoy the show. And very quickly on the travel agent side of it, on the business side of Here to There Travel, thank you so much to my clients who have left reviews on my Facebook page. Thank you to Jenny Bernier for the 5-star, very, very nice review. Thank you to Chris Yancic for an awesome review. Thank you, Nikki Marie, for a fantastic review. And thank you to Katie Schock as well for the review. Planning all of your trips was absolutely fantastic for me. It was a lot of fun. And I'm so, so happy you guys all had such a great trip on your Disney cruises, your Disneyland trips, and your vacations to Walt Disney World. So thank you again for your business and for leaving those great reviews. So just remember, there will be a new episode of the Walt Disney World Word of the Week each and every Wednesday morning, as well as a new episode of the regular Ear to the Air podcast each and every Monday morning. So thank you so much for listening. Until next week, have a great week. Bye-bye. And that is going to do it for... Ah, my foot is stuck. Ow!